Hi, I'm Mark Regev, and I'm here with my co-host, Ruthie Blum, for another episode of Israel Undiplomatic.
Hi, I'm Ruthie, and I'm here with my co-host, Mark Regev. And we have an interesting show today. Please like and subscribe and hit the notifications button.
Can I tell you that we have to start this week's episode 20, with an apology by myself because I made a factual mistake in last week's episode. I said incorrectly that Eisenhower was the first American president to host an Israeli prime minister at the White House. And Eisenhower did indeed host Ben-Gurion, the then prime minister of Israel, at the beginning of 1960 at the White House. But I forgot. And I thank the viewer of this podcast who sent us an email to point it out to us. But in 1951, President Truman hosted Ben-Gurion. So I have been corrected. I stand corrected. And I apologize for misinforming the viewers of this show.
Well, I think that's very big of you. You know, most men I know don't like to apologize. So good for you, Mark. But, you know, I think we have to do two things right now. One, both are very serious, but one is sad and one is what I would call happy, encouraging, maybe not happy. And the sad part was that we woke up this morning to the news that 4 IDF fighters had been killed in Rafah in Gaza yesterday, one of them being a female paramedic. It was the first female IDF soldier to fall in battle in Gaza since the war began. It's always a terrible tragedy when that happens. And it reminds us that the war in Gaza is not over, and not only because we don't have all the hostages back. But yesterday afternoon, we got this amazing news that stunned the entire world, that is attributed to Israel, that thousands of Hezbollah terrorists and commanders had their beepers blow up all at the same time across Lebanon. And most of them were wounded or injured, and a few were killed. I think the death count at the moment is 11. Every single one of these people with the beepers or pagers, if you call them, every single one was a Hezbollah terrorist. It was the most daring, precise attack on thousands of terrorists that we've ever seen. I think that's ever been conducted in warfare.
So it has been the story in the international media since it broke. Leading reports, I heard the news from Britain, I heard the news from the United States. It literally, it opened the news, and maybe because it's, sometimes news about our conflict with our neighbors, the Arab-Israel conflict, it's somewhere inside the newspaper buried, behind other stories. This one took precedence, and you could say, on one end, it took precedence because there's a fear this could lead to a larger escalation, and therefore it's terribly important from a news point of view. Or it appeals to the dramatic, it's like a James Bond type attack. The idea that somehow, supposedly Israel, once again, Israel hasn't officially said anything, but supposedly Israel got inside the network that provided these beepers, pagers, that Hezbollah was using, and managed to put explosives in them. And then all the Hezbollah operatives, not all of them senior commanders, some of them maybe lower down the food chain, but all these Hezbollah operatives had their pages explode, injuring them and killing some. And it really is like out of a James Bond movie. Almost to, how can the press resist talking about this story? And I want to say something here from my perspective. If it was Israel, and I don't know that for sure, a lot of people presume it was. Hezbollah definitely presumes it does. It knows. But this is what I would call, this is a clever move. This is a clean strike, minimal collateral damage. Of course, the Lebanese were talking about the girl, probably a family member who was unfortunately killed, an 8-year-old girl. But I mean, it's clear that that 99.9% of the people who are affected were Hezbollah operatives. It's against their military machine. And the best thing, it shows Israel, if it's true, it shows Israel at its best, that we can, and they know this, that we can get them where it hurts them, that we can find them wherever they're hiding, that we can infiltrate their system, that we know what they're going to do before they're going to do it.
And how ironic is it on many counts here? One is that, okay, let's say it wasn't Israel, it was Micronesia that pulled this off. But the point is that Hezbollah and Iran and the Houthis and all our enemies assume we did it, and they're accusing us of doing it. And perception, particularly in the Middle East, is more important than reality because they feel that we conducted an operation that really set them back. We haven't even had a missile attack from Lebanon since then, and that's amazing.
There were some attacks this morning. There were some attacks
from Lebanon this morning?
From Lebanon, yes.
Okay, well, I take that back then. But
you also have to apologize for your mistakes.
I have to apologize for my mistake. I must have been asleep when that happened.
But you were right. There was a long period, an unusual long period until this morning when Hezbollah wasn't shooting rockets. And it's clear that whoever did this attack, and many assume Israel, that we did succeed, if the accusation is correct, that Israel did succeed in disrupting their network.
Well, we did. We incapacitated them to some extent. But here's the really ironic thing, sort of two things. While the Wall Street Journal came out with a story the day before, yesterday I believe it was, about Sinwar in Gaza and why we're having trouble locating him. And the whole story was based on the fact that he uses a very low-tech communication system. He writes notes and he sends them with couriers to wherever they have to go. That's what it was reported. We don't know if that's true, but that he only writes notes. He does not use any kind of device. Now, Hezbollah in Lebanon, what happened, and I'm not sure exactly when this was, but very recently, Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah made an announcement to all his commanders, terrorists. You say low-ranking, but these guys are all terrorists, whether they're operatives or not. And some of them are officers and higher up, but they're all terrorists. And Hezbollah announced to them that they should by no means use cell phones anymore, precisely because Israel could monitor them or hack them or, the system, cell phone systems, there are towers, etc. So his order was, he was the one behind the order of the 1,000 or 2,000, I don't know how many thousands of beepers he ordered. And beepers are very outdated. People online, young people don't even know what they are.
Correct.
And there were jokes all over the internet about how that's what they're using is, but it was on purpose. He said, this way they can't be hacked. And what did Israel do, or Micronesia, as we said? It figured out when the delivery of those beepers was to arrive, and they were from Taiwan apparently, and somebody intercepted the packages and put in the kind of very small amount of explosives, but near the battery in such a way, and a wire in such a way that somebody remotely. So this was a combination both of like as you said, like a James Bond kind of thing and a cyber attack, because all of those beepers went off simultaneously, mostly in the pockets of these terrorists, which caused them, let's say, how to put this delicately, to lose their testicles, which you can imagine in Lebanon and Hezbollah, it was also triple-time humiliation that not only were they suddenly attacked in this incredible way across Lebanon, but they were also bleeding from an area that is very sensitive to all men, I'm sure, and to terrorists in particular who have, this macho complex. That's one thing. And the hospitals are overwhelmed with injuries. Now, this isn't funny. I have to say one other important achievement was that the Iranian ambassador to Lebanon also had one of those beepers, of course, because Hezbollah terrorists saw the beepers. And he was actually hit in the eye. He lost one eye, I believe, the sight in one eye, and the other eye was severely damaged. Because he must have picked it. He must have heard it beep or whatever it did. And he lifted it up to look at it, and his eyes went. The other guys mostly had them in their pockets. So I have to say, I don't care who accuses me of being unfeeling. I was very, very happy about that.
So I will say the following. First of all, apparently Hezbollah has a strong network in Syria, and they were also hit by this attack. And that's important to know. That the Iranian ambassador was part of the Hezbollah network come as no surprise to you or me, that he would have a Hezbollah beeper, pager. But I'd like to, we're a show in English, and many people listen to us around the world. And so you should know that if you're in Austria or in Britain or in France, just remember what your Iranian embassy is probably doing locally. Yes, the Iranian diplomats are known for their support of terrorism internationally.
Well, they're behind it.
Yes,
support, I would say, is yeah.
It's very true. I would tell you a story from my own experience in Israeli government, that you go into an important meeting and you leave your cell phone outside, because a cell phone can not only tell an intelligence service where you are, it can also use as a listening device, apparently, even if you turn off your cell phone. And so they have this rule that you have to be, cell phones stay outside important meetings where secret things are being discussed. The other thing that pages really is technology from the 1980s, right? I remember people used to have them on their belts and they'd go to the phone but pages, from the point of view of collecting information from intelligence, they are very effective, yes, because they are two-way communication. They're only one-way communication. They only receive, and so probably the last thing Hezbollah thought that someone would use these pages, which they bought specifically, as you said, because they couldn't use the cell phone, that some power, Micronesia, as you correctly say probably, was behind this. And I'd like to say something philosophical, okay? I've been living in this country since 1982. So that's how many years now? That's over 40 years I've been living in this country. And there's something about Israel, and I wrote about this once, there's a dichotomy about Israel. If it's true that we did this attack, right? And many Israelis hope it is us, yes? It makes them feel good. And for good reason. But this shows Israel at the best. Technology, intelligence, leading the world, showing that we can get to terrorists everywhere and anyhow we can infiltrate their systems, right? And then you have October 7th, which is an amazing Israeli screw-up. When I wrote my piece, I wrote it on the basis, remember there was a story when a bunch of Palestinian terrorists fled a prison. And it was clear that this is going back a couple of years, right? And it was like, I called us the Keystone Cops, right? It was one mistake after another. And so we have had these, sometimes think we're like this undeveloped country, and sometimes we're this high-tech superpower that gets everything right. And it's nice that there's more of the latter than the former, that we are doing these sort of attacks. I hope it's true that it is us.
Well, I did. Actually, it's funny you should mention Keystone Cops, because I posted on Facebook, I said that we are a mixture of Keystone Cops and mad geniuses. And that's the truth. And somebody last night, an analyst on Channel 14, said something very true. He said that this operation in Lebanon shows what happens when you know and acknowledge and recognize who your enemy is. And October 7th, what we saw was exactly when we kept refusing to know the enemy and recognize what it was up to. And so we did learn a lesson from then. But have we learned our lesson? Today, there is a big debate. Now, I think every Israeli is very proud, as assuming. Yes. We have to keep saying allegedly, according to foreign reports. However, the big argument right now was, and this is both on the left and the right, is why didn't we launch a major war last night after we incapacitated their communications? Because even though it's temporary, we know that's temporary, what they're not going to regroup and figure out how to communicate with one another. And yes, wherever there are terrorists, there are more in the wings. So the question is, why didn't we take advantage of the momentum And one suggestion is that the reason was we had this all planned out. We were going to do this with the beepers, and we knew what date that was. And then right after that, we were going to launch a real war, not like the war of attrition we're going through right now. But some Hezbollah terrorists caught wind or got suspicious of the beepers. And so we had to act immediately. We had to carry this out earlier than we had intended. And so it's possible that we're just waiting, I don't know, a couple of days, a week or something to do that other thing. I don't know. But if we don't do something soon, we're going to lose the whole momentum a little bit, like we did when we didn't go into Rafah when we wanted to.
So I would say the following. First of all, I thought it was very, assuming that it's us, right? It was very calibrated and very clever. As I said before, this was a strike against a military infrastructure, against Hezbollah operatives. There's no justification whatsoever. They could do it because they're who they are. But for Hezbollah, let's say, to start shooting rockets at Israeli cities, Tel Aviv, Haifa, Jerusalem, yes?
You mean right now in response? In response,
no, because we did not target Hezbollah, we did not target Lebanese civilians. It was a very, to use one of a better words, a surgical strike against a military machine, hitting their communication centers, hitting their operatives. And I don't think there's any legitimacy whatsoever. I mean, maybe they'll do it anyway, but for them to escalate. And I think we've done something that's very clever if it's true that it's us, that we've hit them where it hurts them. They know we're looking at everything that they're doing. They know we can know in advance what they do before they do it. And I think in putting pressure on Hezbollah, the Prime Minister and the government and the military, they always say Hezbollah, when this is over, cannot remain in South Lebanon. They have to move back. They can't be eyeball to eyeball opposite our people.
Too bad they have to exist at all, Mark.
Yes,
but okay.
I'm saying, I'm
yes,
articulating realistic goals.
Yes, okay.
And I think this sort of attack, right, in the end, I mean, Hezbollah is not going to go back and redeploy because they want to. They'll do it because they're forced to do, because there'll be a combination of military pressure and political pressure on them to push back, political pressure from Lebanon, from others to push back. And I think this sort of attack, this sort of military pressure is a good shove in the right direction. Maybe we'll need to do more. Maybe we will have to do more. But I would think that it's possible to do this without full-scale war between Israel and Lebanon.
Okay, so here is where I have got to interrupt you for a moment. It's interesting that you said, it is true, we did temporarily incapacitate them quite a bit, I think.
Assuming that it was us.
Assuming that it was us. Assume that I'm Micronesian, and when I say we, that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
Is that listen to what you said. You said you don't think that they'll necessarily retaliate with missiles on the center of Israel. I don't want them to retaliate. We have to take the initiative. Enough with this legitimacy.
But we
business.
didn't take that legitimacy. And if we were responsible for this attack, it's not showing that Israel's taking initiative.
Course.
But we're doing it smart. We're not playing into their hands.
That is perfect.
Yes.
But it's not sufficient. This is the foreplay, excuse the expression, the foreplay to the real operation. Because all of this idea that they do something, then we retaliate, that they retaliate. Again, Iran, no, we're going to retaliate. We're the aggressors, but we're going to retaliate when you defend yourself. No, enough, okay? Enough. First of all, if we don't launch a serious ground invasion, like the Second Lebanon War in 2006, the last time, okay? If we don't do that, we have lost sovereignty over our northern border. No Israeli will move back home, or there only a few will, but even those who do won't have businesses. The tourists won't want to go there and stay at Airbnbs and all of that stuff. It's not enough to have some kind of, okay, now let's reach a little deal, and then they'll go beyond the Hezbollah will move behind the Litani River like it did last time. It was a bogus arrangement. It didn't work. And this is not enough. This is the precursor. This is great. Now we do that. We get them shaken, and now we blitz and we go in on the ground.
So I think that's possible. We might have to go into the ground in southern Lebanon. There's a lot of Hezbollah infrastructure that we can destroy, tunnels, bunkers, Hezbollah fighters and so forth. And in the end, let's be frank, we can't conquer all of Lebanon. There'll be some sort of arrangement in the end. And so we apply the pressure. We hit them where it hurts. We don't play into their hands by allowing them to do things that are not good for us. And I think, once again, a calibrated approach, which hits them hard militarily where it hurts them, but does not allow them to do things like, well, let's be frank. The moment, it's terrible for the people in the north of Israel, right? Terrible. Many of them have left their homes. There are refugees in their own country, and there are rockets coming across the border, dozens almost every day, right? In fact, every day. But life in 80% of Israel, you came from Tel Aviv this morning, I live in Modi'in, people are going to work, kids are going to school. It's abnormal in the northern part of Israel. In most of Israel, life is pretty much, we know there's a war going on. And once again, if it's possible to win this war, and once again, I'm not convinced it is, but if it's possible to win this war, to push Hezbollah back without having dozens of Hezbollah rockets going on our main population centers, I think it's preferable. If we have to do it, we'll fight any war and we will win. But once again, if we can win this in a way with minimum damage to the Israeli home front, minimum civilian casualties on our side, that's surely a desirable policy option.
No, I disagree totally. I think that enough already with saying most of the country is living normal lives, which is true. I am sorry. I think it is a horrible attitude that anybody in the north is different from me because I live in Tel Aviv. No, we have seen that every time something hit Tel Aviv, we responded. Now, let me just say one thing.
Can I just say, no, but
yes?
Is 10% of your population living in bomb shelters and constant fear, or is 90% of your population? There's a huge difference.
If we need 90% or 100% of our population living in bomb shelters in order to defeat a vicious enemy, then we'll do it.
But only if you need to. If you don't need to do it.
But then, okay, so the question is, do we need to? I'll tell you, I think we should have learned from Gaza that attitude of, no, we'll just do a little this, and then we'll do a little that, and then we have learned we cannot do it without completely defeating them. All they do is rebuild, rebuild, rebuild.
So that's not the goal. That's not the goal of the Israeli government. The Israeli government has articulated a goal.
I don't represent the Israeli government.
But I'm saying for good reason. The Israeli government has articulated a goal in Lebanon, and it was officially adopted by the Security Cabinet.
To enable Israelis to go back to their homes.
And that Hezbollah cannot be in southern Lebanon on the border where their small arms fire, their anti-tank fire, their mortars can kill Israeli civilians. And that Israelis living in the north will live in fear of an October 7th, like Hamas crossed the border and massacred, Hezbollah can do the same.
And they still
push them back.
They have tunnels.
We have not articulated a goal
to defeat them.
I think pushing them back is to defeat them, to destroy them totally, to eradicate them. That sort of goal maybe is beyond realistic expectation that it actually can be done.
Could be. But let's just get one thing clear. I know that the Israeli government, this isn't its policy or that isn't its policy or the Israeli army. I am not representing any of them. I am representing the citizenry of Israel. Of course, my views are not uniform across the country, but I will say one thing. We heard years from the residents of the South, please don't end the war. The last time we had a war in Lebanon in Gaza 10 years ago. And the residents of the South said, do what you have to do. We'll live in our bomb shelters. We don't care. We'll just finish the job. And of course we didn't. So what I'm saying, don't forget, Hezbollah is not just Hezbollah. It's Iran's army. It's Iran's army to protect its nuclear sites, etc. We cannot, by killing as much of Hezbollah as we can, we're also harming Iran, which again, we're going to have to deal with Iran at some point. I don't know whether we have, the tools, the bunker busters, all of that. I don't know, but I do know one thing. Time is not on our side. It is not. And we've seen it. And it's not just a question of whether people can go back to their homes because Hezbollah moved away from southern Lebanon. We may have to enter Beirut, okay? Because if missiles are falling in Tel Aviv, which they will be if there's a real war, we know that. We know that from the previous war. Well, too bad. That's what happens in a war. If we spend all our time saying, oh, wait, we could have fires all across the north, but in Tel Aviv, if missiles are hitting cafes, we can't have that. No, we can have that. We are all citizens of the same country, and we're fighting a vicious war on 7 fronts, and we have to do something about it. And having the Americans send Amos Hochstein here to say, no, let's reach a deal. And if we reach a deal with Hezbollah, then probably in Gaza, we can get the hostages back. It's nonsense. What we need to do is achieve the best victory we can, which means not just pushing these terrorists back a little bit.
So
I'm sorry.
I disagree, and I'll try to articulate my position. I believe that if you look for perfect solutions, you're going to end up with nothing. And we can win this by being smart. We can push Hezbollah back. But if you tell me, and let's pretend you're prime minister for a moment, command the IDF, you destroy Hezbollah in Lebanon, right? We saw what happens in Gaza, which is much smaller, and Hamas is only a fraction of the military power that someone like Hezbollah has. You're talking about something that is, if you have to do it, you can do it and win. But it will take a huge price in Israeli soldiers' lives and in Israeli civilian life. And I'm saying if we can get what we need, a realistic solution, and a realistic solution means also what happens the day after the war. Because you have to, let's say you've pushed Hezbollah out of South Lebanon, then you have to be willing to press the trigger if you see them start trickling back. And you say, oh, it's only a few, we can stand by. No, we have to enforce this. That's incumbent upon us. But I'd argue the following. Yes, your sort of scenario, which says let's go all out and hit them hard and hit them everywhere, and then they'll do the same to us. We'll have dozens of rockets, if not hundreds of rockets on Israeli population centers. In the end, after 30, 40 days, there'll be a ceasefire and we'll have to make some sort of deal. And I'm saying if it's possible to make a deal that's good for Israel without paying the price in human life, I think it's preferable. And you can tell me, well, it's not a perfect solution because Hezbollah will still be in central and northern Lebanon and they'll still have their missile capability. And you will be right. But I often think that if you just buy time, you reach a situation where other things can happen. The regime in Iran can change. The situation in Lebanon can change. There can be other geopolitical changes. You buy time and stuff. I'll tell you a story. When Menachem Begin, the Prime Minister of Israel, proposed bombing the Iraqi nuclear reactor in 1981, very famous strike. Military intelligence, I think the Mossad too, were against the strike because they said there's a huge risk for us. And in the end, they can rebuild the reactor in 3 or 4 years. And so high risk, blowback from our allies. The Americans were against it and so forth, but not just the Americans, the whole world was against it, right? And risk to our pilots, risk would the operation be successful, all this. And you're only going to get 2 or 3 years of, they'll be back in building the reactor and they'll build it underground and you won't be able to get it. Begin correctly, nevertheless, decided to hit the reactor. And what happened? The Iraqis tried to rebuild the reactor, but until they had the war with the Americans, yes, in the Gulf War, they never managed from 1981 till the end of the decade to reconsider. So buying time actually ended the program. We can buy time now because, once again, I don't think you can
Hold on 1 second.
Yes.
It's interesting because when you told that anecdote,
yes,
I was thinking that it actually supports my position.
Which is?
Everyone was against his bombing that reactor. There's going to be blowback. There's going to be this. And he did it anyway. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say everyone's against us doing this. Everyone meaning internationally, not Israelis. I think Israelis are pretty much agreed at this point. We got to do something in a ground invasion in Lebanon.
I'm not against. But you're talking about full-scale war, about bombing them in Beirut and all over Lebanon?
I don't know about bombing Beirut.
So you are a bit on the Regev side.
Hold it. I mean that it all depends. Again, it all depends on what they hit us with.
Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
So,
but should we initiate it? That's my question.
Yes, because we didn't initiate it. Hezbollah initiated this war on October 8th, the day after Hamas invaded our country. Now, we have said again and again, we're buying time. Now, what is true about buying time in the Middle East, which I totally agree with, is that things change. That's how we got the Abraham Accords, for example. But guess what? They're in danger. And you know why they're in danger? They're in danger because first of all, they were brokered by former President Donald Trump, who's running again. That means that the Democrats are either both doing two things, taking credit for it and also doubting it. Those two things. Why doubting it? Because it doesn't include the Palestinians. All right. So, and the Abraham Accords countries are watching us to make sure that we emerge victorious on all fronts, because otherwise they will feel that they didn't attach themselves to the strong horse in the Middle East. 3, when everyone talks about the day after in Gaza, what about the day after? What about the day after? A good solution would be, for example, to have Abraham Accords countries assist, let's say, in ruling Gaza. I think Israel should, but never mind. I know that's not a consensus position, and that's for another argument. But here's the thing. They don't want to do that because everyone's pressuring them to say, what about a Palestinian state? And what about, while, by the way, the Palestinian Authority is just as bad terrorism-wise as the other guys. So we are now in this situation where we need to send a strong message to all of them, including our allies. It's not just our enemies. We have to show that, and we cannot do it by saying, you know what? Okay, we went far enough. That was great. We pulled off a brilliant maneuver, which we did. I was thrilled.
On the assumption that it's us. On the assumption that it's us.
On the assumption that it's us. Brilliant. You can't make it up. The creators of Fauda, the television show, said if they had proposed this in a script, they would have said been laughed out of town. Okay, you can't make it up. It's on the level of extraordinary operations as the Entebbe raid. It is amazing. So, but again, I think we cannot keep saying, oh no, we don't want missiles hitting us. Because then we get it triple time. Then we get rapes and beheadings. Don't you see? We cannot keep saying, no. We got to avoid that. We cannot do it. It's our survival at stake.
I agree our survival is at stake. I believe our enemies have to be hit and hit hard. Hamas, Hezbollah, and so forth. But we always have to have our feet solidly on the ground, and we have to be realistic about what is achievable and what is not achievable. We're coming to the end of this week's episode 20, which means we've been doing this for a while now already, Ruthie. But yeah. I want to say the following. I was walking. Every morning I start my mornings listening to the news and doing a power walk. It's how I try to keep healthy, yes? And the Houthis shot a rocket and they interrupted my walk because the siren went off where I live in Modi'in, and I had to find some place to sort of, in concrete so I could not be out in the open. That's what the instructions were. Luckily for me at the time, I was walking past a building and there was a place to go into. Why do I say all this?
Ballistic missile from Yemen. That's
from Yemen. Ballistic missile from Yemen. And I presume, and you will see if I'm correct or not correct, by the time we meet against this next week for episode 21, Israel would have sent a message back to the Houthis in Lebanon, in Yemen, that it's you don't hit Israel. And send thousands of people running to them.
The Houthis are worried about their phones and people, by the way.
I hope they are.
I would just like to say one thing, that by next week, who knows what news will have happened. The cycle is so fast, we can't keep up with it. And unlike you, I'm hoping that by the next time we meet, we will have troops on the ground in Lebanon.
Not impossible. Good speaking with you, Ruthie.
As always, Mark.